Welcome, everybody. My name's Ken Seaton, co-founder of Athletes Touch with Justin Blaine. Welcome to the Tower of Power podcast that we've got coming at you right now. We're an exclusive community helping former pro and college athletes in the business world get ready to rocket fuel your ship, professionally speaking. I'm here. Justin, go ahead and take it away.
If you like great stories, sports, and success, you're in the right place. Buckle up and join us for a great ride.
Today, we're going to hear from Cady, the peaceful samurai. Born to a father that was a Buddhist priest, and so he's come from a very interesting background to understand business and creativity and how it all integrates together in this incredible fabric. He's got some incredible advice for us about handling COVID and branding and community. Can't wait for you to hear it.
Thanks, Will, for coming, and love for you to kind of get into a little bit about your background, your presentation.
Yeah, certainly. It's really my pleasure to be here. I really appreciate the invite from Owen. A little bit of brief snapshot. I launched the Los Angeles office for Reddit in 2016 and am now the head of brand strategy at Reddit, among other things. Owen has been a great friend in that process. He just recently brought us to our second home as this office went from effectively one to we're up to like maybe 40 at this point, and it's growing faster and faster. So really have appreciated working with Owen and all the conversations along the way. So just want to take a moment to thank him for that, and thank you all for putting in some time to hear me ramble about some things that are important to me. I'm embracing this moment to do something that I don't normally do, which is share a little bit about the process behind the ideas that I share with the world. And I think that this is a time to do that because nobody knows anything for certain right now. And that's what's uncomfortable about it, but that's also what's exciting about it. So I'll share a little bit about myself, but really this is going to be a bit of a snapshot of my life from 2019 into 2020. And the frame, the lens, or the prism, however you want to put it, that I'm looking through things right now that is going to yield something. And I don't know what, but that is the way that I approach my role as the head of brand strategy. So brand strategy, the role of that job is twofold. One of which is to represent Reddit as a brand in the business world. And then the other one is to help brands find their entree into Reddit if they want to, identify a community that they can be a part of, if they want to advertise and get their messaging in the right place at the right time. It's the brand strategy team that's really behind that. And it's a very, very deeply embedded creative process that is informed by insights, informed by intuitions, informed by data. And in order to succeed there, I draw on a lot of my prior experience in the creative field. So as Owen mentioned, first and foremost, I'm a musician, professional bass player for about 15 years. And the way in which I approach strategy, the way in which I approach managing, the way in which I approach the creative process is entirely informed by the musical process. And it's been an interesting journey going through that because what I've found that experience brings to the table that is a little bit unusual is a strong grip on things that are subjective, not things that are objective. So 2020, I kind of doubled back. I with my friends, we got a cabin in Jackson Hole over New Year's, and we said, man, it's the end of a decade. What a wild ride that was. What's the next one going to have in store? And this is where it starts. I got an intuition over New Year's in 2020 that the only work to do now is heal. I don't really know exactly what that meant, but sometimes that's really how intuitions come at you. And so I did a little bit of work to figure out where was that sentiment coming from. There was something that kept nagging at me. I wrote this piece here. I published that on January 6th, the new story for the 2020s, Stop Changing the World and Start Healing It. And that was really looking at a lot of the things that were coming ahead for us, looking at a decade and wondering how different is life going to look in 2030 than it looks in 2020. And the answer felt like it was going to be substantial. Here's where that came from. It came from this emerging idea called brand purpose. And this is something that I encountered in that listening as I moved across all of those different cities. in my travels as a speaker. One place in particular, Cannes, France. Every year, you have the biggest gathering of the creative industry, media and advertisers. Handing out awards for some of the most provocative work, some of the most effective work. It's just a huge gathering of the different companies, advertising agencies, and brands that really want to look at the year ahead. And Alan Jope, head of Unilever, massive, massive company, went on stage at the awards show itself and said, our plan for the next few years is going to be to dispose of any brands in our portfolio that don't have a purpose. We don't want them. We just don't want to be working with any brands that aren't here for a reason. It was really, really a provocative statement for him to make that. And it got the industry scratching its head a little bit. This was in a climate where the thing that was being talked about most was brand safety. This idea of ensuring that a brand's character message is in an environment that is the environment that it belongs in, that it's not adjacent to unsavory content, that it's not endorsing even tacitly some ideas that it doesn't stand behind. And also that the brand is beyond reproach, that the brand is buffered from negative feedback. So to take a shift from brand safety into brand purpose is actually a pretty radical idea. It's going from being very precious to being very purpose-driven, to thinking a little bit less about me, right? And thinking a little bit more about we, starting on the brand level to think about what are the communities that we are part of and what are we doing to support them. This idea didn't come from nowhere. There was a lot of shifts that were taking place in the back half of 2019. I paid very, very close attention when I saw something that a few people on this call probably saw as well. The Business Roundtable issued a letter restating the purpose of a corporation. This hadn't been changed since the 1970s. In the 1970s, you had the paradigm of managerialism that was started by Henry Ford, saying that everybody that works on the assembly line should be able to afford the product that they're building. But when the 70s came in, there was a shift in mindset that was like, all these companies are wasting money. There's all these just sort of fluff in the budgets, and we need to trim down on that. The sole responsibility of a CEO is to drive short-term gains for the shareholders. This is about quarterly earnings. And that was reiterated in the 90s. And out of this is where we got so much of the consulting industry. So for them to come out and say that this is actually something that we feel is different is a pretty significant move. This got massive, massive coverage in the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, Washington Post. And you had the signatures of CEOs from the biggest companies in America, the biggest companies in the world. And so the shift that they said is that we're no longer thinking about shareholders, we're thinking about stakeholders. We're thinking about everybody in our supply chain. We're thinking about all of our employees. We're thinking about the communities where we have our offices and our headquarters. We're thinking about our customers, and we're thinking about the experience that they have because they are a community. And the most important thing for us is to start acting with a sense of purpose for the community that we belong to. So this created a little bit of a stir, but it didn't really create any changes in actions. But it wasn't alone. At the beginning of 2019, Larry Fink, CEO of BlackRock, he gave out a letter, as he does every year, stating the importance of purpose for their portfolio. Massively influential, as I'm sure many people on this call know, hold a lot of capital. And when they speak about what's important to them, CEOs listen. In fact, what he says at the beginning of his letter is, "Dear CEO." And then effectively what follows is him pronouncing what he's going to be evaluating their performance on. But when he gave this letter in January of 2019, he was kind of made fun of for it. It was a little bit silly. It seemed like something that was a little idealistic and surprising coming from somebody that really should be numbers driven. But in 2020, he doubled down on it. And he published a letter citing a fundamental reshaping of finance. "Dear CEO," he says, "as an asset manager, BlackRock invests on behalf of others. And I'm writing to you as an advisor and fiduciary to these clients." Effectively, what he said in this letter is that the world needs brands to operate with a sense of purpose because there are many, many challenges that we face right now, things like climate change being at the top of that list, that are putting us in a situation where we should not just be thinking about growth, we should be thinking about sustainability, because there is no growth in a world that isn't able to foster it. And so your portfolios will hemorrhage funds if we don't take the right steps and shift responsibility in a more purpose-driven way. Fascinating to see this coming from some of the financial leaders of the world. And I operate in the brand world, which has its decisions trickle down from the finance world. So this is why I keep an eye on these things. I was looking at some of the different specifics of what was happening leading up to this as well. And you saw a massive fossil fuel divestment and impact investment, about $8 trillion at the point when I did a little bit of analysis. And I'm sure there are many on this call that have better figures than I do. But what I saw is that there was also another rising trend in the self-care and wellness industry, massive disruption in the way in which people were thinking about their internal health. And altogether, you're looking at this movement of in the area of 10 to 15 trillion dollars in capital away from the structures that we've had in the last few decades and towards something new that hasn't really been determined exactly what that is, if that falls into these SRIs or ESGs, but it's purpose driven. It is about the idea of sustainability, and it's about getting away from something that we know is not a part of the future. The wellness economy, wellness tourism, personal care, beauty and anti-aging, fitness, mind, body, nutrition, healthy eating, preventative medicine, complementary holistic medicines, even wellness, real estate, and workplace wellness. All of these things are just these little pockets that are popping up and continuing to grow. And so there's this shift in this mindset about having a purpose-driven life of well-being, caring for yourself, and caring for others. For the US, a shift in sustainable and responsible investing assets held over the course of the last few years. So you see this continuing to grow. So when I look at that, I just saw a massive shift gathering in force. Didn't really know what it was, but knew that it was connected to this insight that there is this movement towards a healing mindset, a movement towards thinking about the states of our bodies, the states of our communities, and the states of our planet. But whether or not this was going to bear out was still a question. And so fortunately, nothing happened. 2020 has been a smooth ride, and it turns out that all of this was completely just thinking about the wrong thing. Not the case at all, as we know. So this is an interview that I gave to Adweek yesterday. It was published. Reddit's pitch to brands in the age of coronavirus. Listen and then do. The platform is thinking about the culture of quarantine. That's something that you can look up, and you'll see that the sentiments that are in there, effectively what we were saying is everything that we're telling brands right now is an extension of what we told them about community before. There's nothing that's changed. It's just what it means to have a purpose has become a little bit more important. It's not that this is groundbreaking. It's that the sky is falling. So there's a little bit more pressure to actually have some purpose behind your actions. So how do you think about that, right? Brand purpose is something that really is, I think, towards the top of the list of things that are easier said than done. And that's where I want to share a little bit of where I'm thinking about this right now. What's interesting about COVID is that COVID is taking place over a long timeline. And that's the same thing when it comes to something like climate change, but it's a little bit harder to see it. And yes, when you have the Think letter, when you have the Roundtable letter, there's this shift in mindset, but the moments of brand purpose tend to take place when they can help communities, when there's a hurricane, when there's an earthquake, when there's a social movement. And there are different buckets in terms of where these brands can sit. But what's unique about COVID is that a hurricane, the impact of that lasts a month. Same thing with an earthquake. Some social moment where there's some trend that's happening, that might last a week. But in this case, we are in this for months, maybe even a couple of years. So it's extended the moment in which we have to make these adjustments. We know that there's going to be some new normal on the other side, but we don't know what it's going to look like. And in the meantime, we have a normal for right now. So brand purpose really becomes about understanding the story, having a sense of what are the experiences that people are having on the subjective level, and then choosing the role that you have in it. So I'll do a little bit of analysis in terms of what I'm seeing in COVID right now. And these are buckets that are relevant to any moment. If it's a hurricane, or if it's an earthquake, or if it's something on the social realm. When something takes place, they're surviving. And we've seen some brands do incredible work. Dyson inventing a new process to manufacture ventilators. The man with a name himself actually being the one to invent this and shifting their operational assets towards manufacturing those. LVMH, cologne and perfume and beauty company, manufacturing hand sanitizer. We've got all of these different apparel brands that are making hospital scrubs and N95 masks. We've got companies that are shifting their operations towards manufacturing test kits and all of these different essential goods. There are brands that are able to take a role in the surviving in a moment like this. And there's nothing more purpose-driven than that. You are stepping up and you are doing something on a war footing to make sure that people get through. This pillar here is what's very different and unique about this moment right now. This is what is stretched out. This is the thriving. This is about the culture that forms in the moment of the crisis, of the calamity, of the catastrophe. And so this is brands like Zoom. We're on Zoom right now. We're making the best. We're not just figuring out how to cover our essentials, how to make sure we are staying safe. We're finding ways to stay sane. We're still connecting and we're inventing new ways to entertain ourselves. So Zoom, Netflix, gaming platforms, all of the other different video conferencing types, food delivery, home cooking, health and wellness. I've actually done more yoga with my wife in the last month than I have at any point because it's easier now. And the teachers at these local studios in LA are now becoming global brands. So there's something that emerges in these pockets that isn't just purposeful, but it's also an incredible opportunity to be a part of the change that these moments are driving. But not everybody can really do something about that. And that's where a pledging brand comes in. And this is where you see Budweiser, donating some funds donating all of their Major League Baseball advertising budget to, the World Health Organization or to various nursing groups. Jameson raised funds for bartenders who are out of work right now. It makes a lot of sense. It's on brand for them. Airbnb raised $250 million in a fund for their owners, the homeowners who are seeing some impact because they're losing income from people not being able to travel. A lot of CEOs taking pay cuts to make sure that none of their workers are laid off or furloughed. If you can't create value, you can create space for those who can. And that's what pledging is about. And that's an important learning when it comes to brand purpose. And this last bucket here is rebuilding. This is really looking at the brands like Major League Baseball, NFL, Live Nation, live concerts, like bars and restaurants, a lot of these different entities that really don't have much that they can offer right now. And that's a really, really tough proposition, especially if it's going to last for a long time. But their job is to listen to what is happening and identify the new shifts that are going to forecast the new normal. And when the new normal comes back, make sure that it's a new normal. That means that we didn't forget. We're not just trying to brush everything under the rug, but what the people want and what you'll see in what people are writing and posting in think pieces and on social media right now is they don't want to be gaslighted. They don't want the media and entertainment world to come back and say, well, that was weird. Okay, back to your regularly scheduled programming. They want the rebuilder brands to build a better future that is not going to get us to where we got here in the first place, that is going to have some lessons baked into it. And these are all really, really important considerations in the world that I operate in terms of marketing. But it's not just about brand. This is about personal purpose as well. We as people, we can contribute into one of these different buckets. So when I'm looking and trying to find certainty in all the uncertain right now, this is one of the rubrics through which I'm processing a lot of this information about what can I do, or what is this doing, or how can I forecast what is going to happen with this business or this model. So, but how do we figure out our purpose, right? It's a little bit tough to actually wrap our heads around this. Well, I go back to this community culture, and I go back to where it came from, what makes us human, mind, body, and spirit. But being human is a subjective thing. Understanding is a subjective thing. Knowing your story, knowing a story is a subjective thing. And making choices is ultimately, even if informed, subjective. So this is challenging because business is objective. It's a very, very different kind of way of operating. We look at the data. We look at where the money takes us. We look at the market opportunities based on facts. But what I suggest is that that's changing. That's changing right now. And it was already changing before any of this happened. That this movement towards brand purpose that pulled in the Business Roundtable, that pulled in BlackRock, has only found more urgency in the moment that COVID brings. And COVID will also not be the last moment like this. We are going to have more challenges. And so it's no longer a possibility for a business to be purely objective, to be separate from the communities that they are a part of, because what people want is they want to be understood and they want to be helped and they want to support things that are answering that call. So the objectivity of business really comes from this discipline, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, right? Looking at the data, engineering the product, creating the technology that is really the one that we're going to build this business on. And this is amazing, amazing stuff that we can extrapolate from the mind all of these different ideas and then connect on them because we know that they are objectively real. This is what brought us the world that we have inherited today. But this is also what brought us the world that we have inherited today. And so what I suggest is the advent of the subjective in terms of our strategic modeling. And this is something that I have in my mind. HEAL as the complement to STEM, standing for healing, environment, art, and language. Thinking about what is the overlap between these two. How can we realize that we've been thinking out of balance, that we've just been thinking about the objective side about things, but not about these subjective experiences that these ideas, these technologies, these innovations are creating. And so as I begin to advise brands on their strategies and their investments and the projects that they want to pick up, I'm starting to use this framework. Does this innovation, does this technology, this platform, this product, this service, does it heal? Does this amazing piece of objective technology orient itself towards a subjective experience that supports somebody's personal healing or supports the environment that people connect in or listens to the art that people are creating to express their pain, to express their pleasure, to express their subjective experience? Does it use the language of these communities that we are a part of? Is it actually honoring that subjectivity of what it is to be human? Because I don't believe that we can just carry on and claim that decisions are just business anymore, that moment is behind us now, and that intuition is at the center of this, that the only work to do now is to get back into balance and to heal, to think about everything that we're all going through and realize that these are subjective experiences and that we have a role to play as people and as brands to be purposeful in how we address those. So that's where I'm at. I appreciate you all listening to me share a little bit of my point of view.
Welcome to the intermission. Kent, who's this group for? Is it for Super Bowl champs?
Check.
How about cross-country skiers?
Check.
How about Olympic synchronized swimmers?
Triple check.
So it sounds like anybody who has an athlete's mindset or mentality could qualify here.
Quadruple check, Justin. This group is a rocket fuel powered community for former athletes to use their state of mind to succeed in the sport of business. Well, that was pretty darn amazing and so good that it only makes us wonder, obviously a lot of us aren't sort of creative at your level. I mean, you were a musician for a long time. Why don't you take us a little bit more behind the kimono of Will? Like, how do you come to these kinds of thoughts where you're thinking about things like this? We were told by Owen that there's some Zen monastery sort of in your background. That's got an ominous sound. Like what's Will about, and how has he combined creativity, perspective, and business?
Yeah, great question.
I was going to ask, is this at all medicinally induced? Because, it's incredible, this whole vibe.
I appreciate that. I didn't hear the first part of what you said. Was there a question in there that you wanted me to address, Justin?
No, he's just making a comment. He loves what you're
but
about.
I appreciate the love for the vibe. The rumors of Zen monasteries are true. My father was a Renzai Zen Buddhist priest, and I was studying at the Berklee College of Music, and so he would be at these week-long Vipassana sessions, can't talk for 10 days, and going deep into these, meditative states. And me and my just annoying musician college buddies would drive out to the Zendo, and our job was to play jazz to bring them out of meditation and back into the real world. So we have these great photos of these monks kind of doing cartwheels and their feet as music stands as I'm just sort of playing Charlie Parker. But I got to sit down with them quite a bit. My father's masters, and they did some sort of one-on-one sits, and these were really intense people. Renzai Zen is the practice that underlies the samurai tradition. So it's eyes open, very focused, making sure that you're able to get into an alert state to be able to understand the phenomenology of what is happening around you. The most important part at the core of it is the idea of non-existence, that you as an ego don't exist, right? And so that certainly informed a little bit of looking at this me to we mindset, but it also informed the heal mindset. Electric bass, not as good at stand up as I would like to be because it's by far the cooler instrument, but yeah, definitely play both as much as I can. So the idea of looking at subjectivity as something that ought to be considered with even weight as objectivity comes from that, because the Buddhist process is not science, right? It's not technology, it's not engineering, it's not mathematics, but it's a laboratory of the inner experience. And so a lot of that work that I had with those monks through the years really informed a way of looking at myself and seeing an emotion arise and thinking, well, this is interesting information. What is this information telling me about what I'm feeling now? And then I chase that. So case in point, taking a pause, getting this intuition about feeling the need for healing and not really knowing where that came from, but being able to trace it back to brand purpose. And then music itself, a really, really great discipline in terms of being able to take different combinations and recapitulate them in different orders. So one of the finger exercises I used to do for the bass is every combination of 1 through 4 to just create that dexterity. And even while watching TV or something like that, just 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 4, 3, right? 2, 1, 3, 4, 2, 1, 4, 3, all the different combos. Unbeknownst to me, I was training my mind to take any ordering of ideas and rapidly reorder it in all of these different combinations and then find what is good.
Well, Will, it's interesting because, you talk about the objective and the subjective, and business is very objective, how much money you're making, right? I mean, so you're working in a world of people that measure you by, sort of quantitative measurements and benchmarks. Obviously, you're playing sort of to a different drum, but here you are, a musician for years and years. We don't know how you actually transitioned into the business world. Was it one moment? Was it a spark between a conversation between you and somebody in business where they're like, wait a second, that's really smart what you said. I want you to think about some of the things we're doing. How did you get involved in the objective world of business? You sound like a creative.
I got shanghaied into it. Like I had no idea, like it just completely got pulled into this thing without knowing that it was where I was headed. And it was a step-by-step process. I like to think that I would have ended up here anyways, because in 2009, I was creating YouTube videos for a music products company. And I was just basically, I didn't really know what to do other than just plug in my bass and just play as best as I could with their products. And so that was kind of like early shades of what we would call influencer marketing right now. I built a YouTube channel. I was just playing bass and I was giving clinics and doing all that. And I would use Reddit to promote the videos. I would use other different social media sites to promote those videos. And so it was one of those things where, honestly, a little bit similar to what we have right now, you're going through such transformation, in this case, the birth of the internet, that when you just jump in and you get involved, what you're doing that feels right and feels good and has some resonance ends up being entire business models 10 years later. And so that led to me getting into digital media because just I needed to make a move from Boston to Los Angeles because there was just more opportunity out here. I had no idea what digital media was. And then the brainstorming aspect of working with brand partnerships was a lot like a jam session for me. And I'm like, oh, I can do this. Just sort of actually just jumped into a room where a brainstorm was happening. It wasn't my job. I was just like a spreadsheet monkey and just started talking. And it just led to me changing jobs and then just sort of growing through different roles. And when Reddit in 2016 was looking to build a business, I knew the power of it. So it wasn't something that the rest of the business world really looked at as something to take seriously, but I knew because of my experience, and that was right place, right time. I don't think I would get hired at Reddit today.
That's pretty amazing what you just said right there, Will. We love your candor, your genuineness is pretty awesome. Justin Blaine has a question for you.
Yeah, Will, thanks. Love the perspective. My question would be, you have the unique vantage point of seeing big brands, small brands, and everywhere in between, whether it's through direct interaction with Reddit or in general in the digital landscape, I would say what frustrates you about maybe brands' inability to connect with the consumer, or who has pleasantly surprised you in a way that's made them much more successful, or something or a message that resonates with you, just as a couple of examples.
Oh, man, great question. I work through a lot of frustration all the time. I'll start by saying that, what I shared about Alan Jobe and Unilever really surprised me. And I was really interested in how and why they made that provocation. And I think that there's still a lot to be borne out here, but I think it's rooted in a rethinking of capital, that the dollar does not capture the full picture, and that there are other ways that a brand can accrue capital. Attention capital, for example, very, very, very valuable, and it can be converted to other kinds of capital. And so I think that was very, very forward looking, even if it doesn't make a lot of sense, to say we're going to focus on doing the right thing, because we are seeing that all of these other brands are hemorrhaging trust, hemorrhaging attention, hemorrhaging these other things that could be described as capital. And yes, they're making money in the short term, but it's not going to last in the long term. And that's modeling it out without crisis, without catastrophe. And what we're seeing right now is that brands that are doing the right thing are receiving an enormous amount of attention without having to spend any money on advertising. And I think that is a big wake-up call for the economics of advertising. The brands that frustrated me are the ones that pay such close attention to the data as to obfuscate them from the truth. So there were a few trends in marketing where ad tech and measurement really became important, because a lot of providers were honestly being shisty, and things like viewability and ad fraud were really the kind of trends before brand safety and brand purpose. And it was because just traffic was fake. They were faking it, or they were selling one thing and just kind of through like a shell game, just giving advertisers another. And that created all of these different mechanisms to measure traffic, measure impressions and clicks and views, and verify, that the ad is on screen and being played. And all of that very, very important stuff, because you want to make sure that you're receiving what you're buying. But some advertisers in a few different pockets paid only attention to that they were bringing themselves to just absurdity in their decisions, because they were following what the data told them, but the data was completely detached from the subjective reality of what it's like to experience their brand. Case in point, how difficult it became to look up any news website and not be hammered with ads. So yes, your ad is being served, but for every person that sees your ad, they hate your brand a little bit more.
Awesome answer. Justin, question.
You mentioned about how hurricanes, tornadoes, all those things kind of have an effect for a shorter period of time, a week, and affect people. But how are you finding it's different with this, and the fact that, I don't know, has there ever been anything like this that affects every single person? I mean, I find those things kind of, not only are they for a short period of time, but they're generally regional. I mean, have ever been anything in the history of our world that's affect literally every single person at every level? And how do you see dealing with that differently, or the effect of that?
Yeah, I mean, it's like I don't know, Krakatoa in 1888, when it sort of brought the world into darkness for a few months, or
absolutely no idea what the fuck you're talking about.
I don't know. I don't think it's ever happened. But I think that that's what's so deeply, deeply profound about what is happening on this level, is that it is, at the same time as we're being pushed into isolation, we're also being pushed into a planetary consciousness, because we are all going through the same thing. The combination of those two things is awesome.
Yeah, I mean, isn't it a really unique time to almost get a comp in sociology, psychology, economics? I mean, it's because it is maybe at different degrees for everyone, especially us here in LA or in our little nicer bubbles, but it literally is affecting every single person in some way. So you have a comp to see how everyone handles it. I think it's a unbelievably unique time in history.
It is, and it makes linear thinking futile. You can't really look to where we came from to understand what's happening next. And what is happening in one place, the way in which people are solving their solutions in isolation doesn't necessarily happen in others. And so the uncertainty is really, really rich. I think that the thing to do right now still is to pause and listen and just take a beat. And then that's actually where inspiration comes from, is when you actually stop the wheels. Then something else comes in, and then that ends up being something that's born out of the future, not born out of the past. But it's hard to stop.
That was a beautiful quote there. We're running against time. We actually could go for a long time with you, Will. We're not just saying that. Usually we just cut people off. We play the music and yank you off. This is really some powerful stuff. I'm going to try to wrap up two questions from some of the audience into kind of one, which is one, how are brands, if you've sort of unveiled the heal message, to them, this is one question, how are they reacting to your heal message? And whether you're working on that with Reddit. And then the second question, slightly on, is how can business owners shift from a completely revenue-driven sort of focus to something purpose-driven when they've never had that challenge before? So maybe you can throw it together here with something unbelievable.
Yeah. So for the first part, heal, I haven't put that in front of brands, and that's something that, I'm peeling back the curtain and showing my process. This is something that is in my mind. It's a rubric through which I've done some writing. I've done some speaking about it as well. I am creating a community about it and just seeing where it goes, because to me, it's just really, it's a meme is what it is, in the same way that STEM is a meme. It's just a frame. It doesn't really have particular form per se. And I'm just putting it out there in the world, because what's important to me is that we take another look at subjectivity, that we get out of our heads and into our hearts, that we have, to go back to the dojo for a second, a little yin to complement the yang. And that's really the purpose for that. Whether or not that materializes into something for Reddit, I don't know. That's less important, as much as making sure that Reddit is able to do what Reddit needs to do in this moment. And so that's still being figured out, because again, it's uncertain. And so for the second part of that question, the brands that have never been through a moment, I would say right now we are certainly in a time where the ceiling on growth has dropped, and there is the consideration of sustainability and mitigating losses. And so you kind of have to not just think about growth potential, but think about, the other side, which can be a little scary. You don't want to look down, but that is a part of it. But also there's a wealth of information out there in terms of brands that have gone early on this. For Unilever, when they say brand purpose, that's not just, their president talking on stage. They have a whole section of their website dedicated to it. There's some brands like Chobani, great story from the founder of Chobani in terms of what they did to not just create a yogurt company, but they invested in the town, because they had all of these different, food plants that had gone out of business, and they resuscitated these towns, and that's a part of their story. So fortunately, again, like what I said earlier, it's not that the ground is breaking, it's that the sky is falling, right? So the ideas have already been formed. They're already out there. You can look them up. Brand purpose is a great keyword to use to just look up some strategies. So I would offer to just do some digging and do some hunting.
Awesome stuff. Thank you again for being here, sharing some wonderful words of wisdom. I got a big takeaway, which is pause and listen. Something I don't do very well. So we're all going to learn from you tonight about that. So we appreciate it.
Another great story in the books. Who's inspired with me? Kent, where do people go from here?
God, Justin, I'm so glad you asked me that question. Everybody today, we're so excited to have you on this show. If you're interested in our Rocket Fuel Accelerator, if you'd like to join membership at Athletes Touch, go to our awesome website at www.athletestouch.co, and we'll see you soon. If you want to look us up on our social handles, LinkedIn, and Twitter, Athletes Touch, at Athletes Touch. Thanks, guys.